I just want to start this video off by saying the North remembers. Seriously, like the Grand Northern Conspiracy plot in the A Song of Ice and Fire books is probably like the greatest thing ever, right? So you realize through several POVs, mainly Davos and Theon, that there's something else going on in the North, and it may not require Jon Snow or Stannis. In this video, I want to discuss certain aspects of the Grand Northern Conspiracy. The North remembers, in this video, will probably be broken down into 3 parts to make it more easily digestible. If you enjoy this, slap a like on the video. Like goal is going to be 420. Get it? Alright, now first things first. We need to talk about Theon, right? So Theon was a ward of the Starks. He grew up a part of the Stark household. He remembers that at times he did feel like he may have been, a brother to Robb and Jon and Bran, but he also remembers that he was a ward. He was a captive. He was a hostage, right? So that feeling always lingered over him. All that aside, he ended up betraying the Starks, and Ramsay Bolton has turned him into REEK. He's tortured him to the point where he has fractured his personality. He's broken his teeth, he's flayed his fingers, he's chopped off toes. REEK is literally Winterfell's whipping bitch. It's like the ultimate fate for a Turncloak. Theon Turncloak, to be exact. Like, during Theon's chapters in A Dance with Dragons, he actually prefers to sleep in the kennels with the dogs. Like, he calls them Ramsay's girls, and they're more comfort to him than anything else. Like, as a matter of fact, in one of his early POV chapters in A Dance with Dragons, he's sitting in his cell, and he hears footsteps coming down the hallway. It's Little Walder and Fat Walder, but Theon's eating a rat, and he knows that if Ramsay catches him eating a rat, he's going to be in trouble. So Theon tries to hurry up and finish it, and then they, push open the door, and they're like, is he eating a rat? Is he eating a rat? Like, it's really funny. It's actually, it's not, when you realize that Theon's, like, so tortured beyond, like, he begs for death. Death would be, like, a sweet escape, right, at this point. But, so anyway, a blizzard sort of bears down on Winterfell, and there's these, 3 women that show up. They're actually spearwives in disguise, and it's actually revealed that they're responsible for killing some of the people at Winterfell, right? So Holly and Rowan are their names, and they're actually free folk spearwives. They find Theon walking one day, and they pull a dagger on him and take him to this dude Abel in the ruins of the burned tower. But let me backtrack a bit, because before that, when Theon would walk the grounds of Winterfell, like he would go into the Godswood, he has trouble sleeping, right? So he would walk at night. He ends up running into this individual known as the Hooded Man. He's got a cloak and a dagger. Hooded Man is kind of a name given to him from the fandom. But basically, Theon knows that this man is hostile towards him, and he ends up mentioning that Theon Turncloak, Theon Kinslayer. I'm not, I was Ironborn. False is all you were. How is it you still breathe? The gods are not done with me. Lord Ramsay is not done with me. I'll leave you to him then. That was a quote from the encounter that Theon has in his POV chapters with the Hooded Man. So basically, there's several things going on here, right? There's several individuals that could potentially be the Hooded Man of Winterfell, or the person that's walking around causing these deaths in Ramsay's camp. Now, it's interesting. I'll step even further back for a second here, because Roose Bolton has spies in Stannis' camp, and Stannis has spies in Roose's camp, although Stannis may not be that aware of his spies. Wyman Manderly, with Davos' chapters, I'll talk about that in a second. But Jon Snow sends Mance Rayder to go and rescue his sister, right? So Melisandre at the wall, she tells Jon Snow she sees his sister in the flames, and that she's going to be, leaving towards him. And Jon Snow does think that Arya is the one who's being held captive at Winterfell. We all know that it's not. It's Jane. Or Jane rhymes with pain. So, okay, let me really try to focus this. My first point is that Jon Snow sent Mance Rayder to Winterfell to go and rescue his sister. That's what these spearwives and Abel are trying to do, is to rescue the fake Jane Poole, right? The person that Theon knows is not Arya. The person that everyone else who has seen her before should know that, but none of these people know that in Winterfell, right? So everyone thinks she's the heir to Winterfell. So then when we get Theon's POV and we find out that there's people that are turning up dead, like there's Yellow Dick, which is one of Ramsay's boys, a couple of other people that are killed, we realize that this could be Mance Rayder, and then we see his spear wives. But now here's the thing. They don't claim to have killed everyone who has died in the walls of Winterfell while the blizzard is raging. And then another thing to consider is that Theon has a fractured personality, like I mentioned earlier. He has to keep reminding himself, I must remember my name. My name is REEK, rhymes with stink. Like, he has to keep telling himself who he is, who this new version of him is. But there are times when he's Theon. There are times when George writes from his POV that Theon is somewhat returning, right? The more he starts to walk around Winterfell, the more his memories come back, the more he starts to feel terrible for what he did. It's also mentioned that he's eating more, right? So once Roose comes back to Winterfell, he sort of has this conversation with Theon, and he tells him, like, look, I know my bastard is crazy, but, you know, he something about the interaction with Theon and Roose lets you know that Roose is the one who's really in charge, and Theon is treated a little bit better and given a little bit more food, and he starts to gain his strength back, but it's not directly said that. You just kind of know because Theon is partaking in meals. So it's possible that Theon, with a split personality, much like that movie that I can't remember the name of, I think it's actually Split, but James McAvoy has split personality, and he doesn't have like any memory of what he does when he's in those other personality states. Theon's hair is turned white and brittle and gray, and he looks like an old man when Asha sees him, and he falls to the ground in her POV chapter, right? Theon is sort of just thrown on the ground, and she's like, ooh, this thing stinks. What is it? This old man. And then she realizes it looks that bad, stinks that bad, and his hair's gone that white. A fractured personality is 100% in question. So if that's the case, and Mance Rayder and these spear wives aren't responsible for killing every single person at Winterfell, maybe Theon is actually doing it, and he switches back to REEK and doesn't remember committing any of the acts, right? So he's so afraid of Ramsay, he even thinks that Ramsay can, know his inner thoughts, right? So he has to correct his thinking. He's not saying words out loud, but he thinks something that's wrong that REEK isn't supposed to, but Theon would think, like, Ramsay has fucked this dude up. But he is so screwed that he thinks even his thoughts can be intruded on. Now, this is sort of random and completely off topic, but there's also a House Banefort in the World of Ice and Fire who, they have a black hooded man on a gray field with a fiery tresser around it. Like, that's their sigil. House Banefort claims descended from the hooded man of the Age of Heroes, right? So he was this mythological person from the Age of Heroes, which is a time period that was thousands of years ago, before the events of our story. Like I said, completely unrelated. But getting back on track here, there's a moment where Theon sort of recovers his sanity, and it's interesting, it's worth noting, because he's praying in front of the God's Wood, and he looks and he sees, at least he thinks he sees, the face of Bran in the weirwood tree. And it says Theon. And then that's when he intentionally remembers who he is. And this sort of relates back to what I was saying earlier, that some of these murders could be committed by Theon himself with the help of Bran, who reminded him who he was. Like the fact that he saw Bran in the Heartwood tree, and the fact that he knows that those boys that he killed weren't Bran and Rickon. They could still very well be alive, and maybe he isn't as guilty as he thought. And one of the ways to make amends is by killing some of Ramsay's men inside Winterfell. Alright, now another figure in this Grand Northern Conspiracy hooded man plot, it's kind of, I don't know how it's related, but there's this lady named Barbary Dustin. Right? Now, just as a quick backdrop to who she is or what her motivations are without spending another 3 minutes talking about her in this video, is that she's someone who was promised to a Stark. She obviously got skipped over by Catelyn. She's scorned by this, but she wants Theon to show her the ways into the crypts. She wants to see what's down there, or how to get down there, and while Theon takes her there, he notices that one of the statues from the old kings, one of the statues is missing the iron sword that was said to keep the evil spirits at bay. So it's kind of like hinting at maybe, that could be the Hooded Man in Winterfell or whatever, one of these Forsaken Stark ghosts. But it's kind of interesting that Barbary Dustin is so, like, interested in wanting to get down there, and she talks about how she loved one of Ned Stark's brothers. I can't remember who it is right now. Let me know down below in the comment section. But it's interesting as of note because there's also other times she talks to Theon, and she mentions how there are certain things that Roose may or may not know about, and she talks about certain people like Wyman. Now, she does sign the letter, like, declaring her loyalty to Roose Bolton. It's just interesting, though, because she definitely has a grudge against the Freys because they killed some of her family members at the Red Wedding. And the fact that she's sort of obsessed with the Starks kind of lets you know that the North remembers. Now, even though she, like, at a feast, she does calm down Wyman Manderly's men after they're insulted by the Freys, which kind of makes you think that she's, like, neutral or whatever. She's completely absent when Wyman and the Freys go at it after the death of Little Walder. So basically, one of the Freys slashes at Wyman's neck after they insult each other for a little bit, and Wyman's so fat that he doesn't die or whatever, but he gets slashed in the neck and it cuts through a few of his chins, right? So tensions are building at Winterfell, and Barbary Dustin is suspiciously absent when Little Walder's dead. Okay, so I just mentioned Wyman, and I'll mention him a little bit for this video, but then I'm going to get out of here and save more for part 2. I got to keep you guys wanting more. Basically, Wyman, during Davos' POV chapter, right? Davos is sent from the wall by Stannis to go and basically bring more men into his cause, right? So he ends up making his way to White Harbor and is immediately imprisoned because there are Freys present at White Harbor, right? So Wyman throws him in what's called the Wolf's Den, and Wyman, basically, we're left on a cliffhanger because Wyman puts on an awesome mummer's performance, and he's like, "I will not eat until I see Davos's head on a spike with an onion in his mouth." Sorry, I just had to do that. Couldn't help myself. But, so we're like, oh shit, Davos is about to die, if you haven't read the books. But then, that's not the case. Davos is locked up in a cell for days and days, and he's fed. And then on the last day, he isn't fed his meal, so he's like, oh, this is it. I'm about to lose my head. But then he's escorted through a dark passageway and into Wyman Manderly's room, where he explains to him that, hey, I'll help you. I'll claim for Stannis, but you gotta do one thing for me, and that's go get Rickon Stark from Skagos. Now, it's not exactly like that. There's an Ironborn lad who is, like, basically in the company of Wyman and his men, and he can't speak, but he throws a dagger at a map, and the dagger lands on Skagos. Skagos is famous for unicorns, but also cannibalism. Now, that seems like a good point to wrap this video up. I definitely will be discussing more in depth in part 2 and in part 3. I've actually already started working on those right now. So if you all enjoy this and you want more A Song of Ice and Fire content, please do me a massive favor by making sure you're subscribed. That way, if you were subscribed, you'll get an alert if you have your notifications turned on every single time I drop a video throughout the Wait for Winds of Winter or House of the Dragon Season 1, or as it's known on this channel, The Long Night.